Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Condition, a podcast devoted to analyzing films and what makes a movie a movie. I am your host, Raul Alejandro Mendoza, a filmmaker and film critic. Today, I am joined by Bradley Simmons, aka Young Yoda. They are the co-host and co-founder of the Nerd Core, and today they have selected Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Hey, Brad, how are you doing today?
Hey, Raul. Long time no see.
Yeah, we haven't actually recorded this whole week, so
Yeah,
like,
we've
I
been we've been watching the actual movie and then everything about making the actual movie.
yeah, it's easy to say that I've missed you this week. I've actually was like, it doesn't feel right that I'm not what's it called recording with you.
Yeah, it's been kind of weird
Yeah,
because I've been coming home and I'm just like I'm just watching Kurosawa.
yeah, I'm just watching stuff. I'm like not actually what's it called doing anything. I'm just watching stuff. I just have to wait until Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how this week has been.
yeah,
So it's been a pretty chill week for the most part.
yeah. I was like, wow, I was actually able to get through some of my stuff. I was like, oh, that's because I don't have to like what's it called binge. What's it called
I don't have to watch all this stuff for
yeah.
this week.
Yeah, it's like I only had to concentrate on one thing this week, other than Shogun. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
all
and
I
I
had to.
still haven't got to Shogun yet.
Me
So
neither. So like, we're there, we're both there, and I'm like still on the second episode. Haven't even finished the second episode of Fallout. Oh
I
my
I
god.
I haven't even started that, so that'll be a probably this weekend thing.
Yeah. Well, Brad, for those who may not know you, and because they're only watch on my channel and stuff, introduce yourself, bro.
Good evening, audience. I am Brad, aka Young Yoda, um, annoyer of Raul during the Nerdcore, co-host overall. Alex, you know, you know Alex.
Annoyer of Raul, hater of Alex.
Yes, I don't hate Alex. I just I do more work on this podcast than Alex. I just put it that way.
Yeah.
Also, engineer. For everyone who doesn't know, I have 2 degrees. So,
Yeah. So you're not
because
uneducated.
so I'm not uneducated. I've held a job for I think close to 14 years. So I have a job. For anyone telling me to keep my day job, I mean I could do that. So this is kind of my passion project, my hobby. I come on
Yeah.
here, I talk with my best friend in order to find new good movies that I either love and he hates, or that he hates and I love, or we both love.
Yeah. And through the 8 years that we've been doing the Nerdcore podcast, we've discussed so many films. We've discussed, this movie that we're talking about today. And this season, even though it's been a very rough season to like schedule and to record, there was no doubt in my mind when Brad selected this movie today that this would be the season finale of season two.
It has to be.
It has
It's
to be.
it's Akira Kurosawa's triumphant epic. It
Magnum
is.
opus, the most influential movie of all time. I mean, this just had to be. Last season we had um the Last Temptation of Christ was the final episode of season one, and I thought that was
Great movie.
a great movie and a great episode. But this season we had a lot of great movies too. But I saw this one in the list, and I said, Brad, I'm giving you the keys to the castle, Brad. We are going to be the final episode of season two, and I'm really excited, man, because I
I
think
am
that
excited to talk about my emperor, my favorite director of all time. He is royalty in my eyes. No one can do better than this man. He has not made a bad movie, even the horse documentary.
yeah, yeah. So I think Brad, we've been preparing a lot because last month on Nerdcore, actually I'm sorry, in March we did Kurosawa month. We did our first or like our Kurosawa month for his birthday, but
Hmm.
typically in the continuity of things, it was our fifth Kurosawa month that we did.
We've done a lot of Kurosawas in the past
Yeah,
8 years, and that's just the months. That doesn't
yeah,
include the international films we've
no,
done of his throughout the years.
yeah, the ones that we selected for International Film Month. Um, so we did that, and then I told Brad, if we're gonna do this episode correctly, I think we need to actually like research a fuck ton. which is something that we do not do a lot for the Nerdcore. Like it's because like it's two different podcasts, right? Over
Yeah.
there, it's like we watch and we review and we talk about
And
the
and
movie.
it's a very short review. It's a 30-minute
Yeah,
review. It's not like a 2-hour review where we go really deep dive into this
yeah,
stuff. It's more of the basics of like that was a good movie, or
yeah,
that wasn't quite it.
yeah. And it's not the first time we've talked about Kurosawa on here. I mean, last season Brad selected Ikiru, and we did. That was a great episode, and I loved that movie. But I'm like, Brad, this is a massive movie
It's
that
huge.
is the most influential movie of all time. I think that we have to really do a lot of research here. So Brad went ahead. He cracked open that Criterion DVD he has. He watched the supplements. He watched the movie itself.
The supplements are really good, by the way.
Yeah. Yes, very good stuff. You also read some stuff, right? You were reading some stuff online.
Yeah, I found a few articles online that I've read through that
Yeah.
had, I mean, different perspectives on Kurosawa's thoughts and emotions and what he was wanting to make with this
Yeah.
that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. I went ahead on my side. I did the same thing. I opened up my Blu-ray. I watched the film. I watched two supplements. I sadly could not finish the Nagiso Shima interview with him, where he talks because what's it called? I wanted to skip around to at least get to the part where he talks about Seven Samurai, but just time consumed me, and I had to, I ended up like not getting to that, so I didn't really finish. But I feel like what he says in that is pretty much what was reiterated throughout all the other supplements.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I mean those other two supplements I think covered quite a bit of the film
yeah,
and why this was made, along with the how and the who.
yeah. So I watched the film, I watched two supplements, and then I had checked out a book called Perspectives on Akira Kurosawa, which was a collection of a bunch of reviews, scholarly articles, essays on Kurosawa's life and career, and went to the index and I went ahead and I wrote down every single page that included the word Seven Samurai in there. And I read all those pages and I gained the knowledge I could get. So to say that we were preparing for this episode is an understatement. This
Now,
is
this is I mean, you have to prepare for this.
yeah,
It's literally what, a 3 hour and 20 minute movie
three
of
hour and 27 minutes, and I believe
27.
five of those minutes are a intermission, right?
Yeah, I mean, just it's a movie at a grand scale. This is kind of, I think this is like the original Kurosawa epic,
Yes.
because you have Ron that comes after this, you have Kagemusha that comes after this, another big budget samurai epics.
Yeah.
But this is the first.
Yeah. But I'm gonna go ahead and we already introduced them to Kurosawa back in season one because of the actual um, Ikiru episode. But I'll go ahead before we actually get into the film introduction. Brad, was there anything that you learned about Kurosawa during the research that we did here? Um, that what's it called? That you want to go ahead and say here before we introduce the movie?
I learned that his mind frame going into this, it started out from kind of almost a rebellious form, for the occupation that was occurring in his country after World War II, but it kind of then pivoted to a humanistic form. And you see that in
Mm-hmm.
the film. You see that in the film. There are very rebellious characters, but the humanism that comes after, and what he's trying to do is trying to show his people that, some of these great traits of the samurai we need to keep as a collective. There are some of honor and respect that we need to keep as a people and not allow, these Western ideals to overtake those, because that's what makes us great, is this kind of Bushido ideals and that respect.
Yeah. I also learned that the way he made movies completely changed after this because like he exhausted himself in making this movie. Like he was part of the reason why this movie took so long to be made was because he exhausted himself. Like he
And
was so
the
his frame look, like his look into how movies are made completely changed after this one.
And also, well, the whole multiple cameras
Mm-hmm.
aspect, that was
Yeah.
something that was new. I didn't know it actually snowed on set. I didn't
Yeah.
know this was like a made in the winter,
Yeah.
and that's why the last few scenes are so muddy. I didn't know that. I just
Yeah.
thought they like poured. I thought that was planned. They just like
Yeah.
gushed some water out there with fire hoses and called it a day.
I also learned, Brad, that us, we've always talked about how much we love the lighting of Kurosawa, and we were always kind of under the impression that it was mostly natural.
Yeah,
Wrong.
no, they
He's
had mirrors,
he had
big old
mirrors.
freaking mirrors.
He had light panels and stuff like to actually like do this look. So this whole time, Brad and I have been convinced like it's mostly natural what he's doing. It's like just using the sun as light source. No, he's using mirrors and he's also using like light panels and stuff. Like he's actually
There's
has lights out there being
yeah,
used.
there's techs on the ground trying to
Yeah,
aim the mirrors at people's eyes to
causing eye
get that
injuries.
glisten, get that glisten.
Yeah. So I learned that about like doing this research for this movie about Kurosawa, and of course I learned that that I'm not gonna lie, I think it probably would have been a big pain in the ass to work with Kurosawa because just the way that the writers would describe him working with him, he'd be like, oh, here's this draft. What do you think about this? And he goes, do you not understand how to make a fucking movie? This is not like like
Well,
it would have been the biggest pain in the ass.
then they would rewrite it and it'd be like, why didn't you just do this the first time?
Yes.
I laughed at those
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah. So I'm gonna guess that like that's what was one of the big things that I learned too was that probably working with Kurosawa was not the healthiest thing,
What?
but
And then
but in the end he made great films, and
he made
it
great
was
films.
worth the what's it called, the head scratching and wanting to put your head through a fucking wall when you worked with him.
Well, and then you had where he scrapped two films before this, and he basically took the characters from one
Hmm.
of those films and just placed it in this film.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happened.
Yeah. So let me just go ahead and go into this introduction here for the film. So originally, Kurosawa wanted to create a film about a singular day in the life of a samurai that would end with the samurai committing ritual harakiri. The idea would be thrown out because of the lack of historical detail about the day-to-day lives of samurai. The next idea was that of five famous samurai, but after revising a draft, the script did not work out. Finally, the idea of samurai defending farmers came to Kurosawa, Hideo Oguni, and Shinobi Hashimoto. So they locked themselves in an inn and took 6 weeks to write the script for Seven Samurai. Two of the samurai were molded after historical figures, Musashi Miyamoto and Kamizumi Nobutsama. Akira Kurosawa was influenced during this production by the works of Kenji Mitsuguchi regarding the historical accuracy of the film. Production of Seven Samurai began on on May 27th, 1953, but took longer than expected after threats by the studio to shut down the film for going over budget and Kurosawa working himself past exhaustion. The film clocked in at 207 minutes, but out of fear that Western audiences would not react well to the runtime, Toho ordered 50 minutes to be cut from the film for it to premiere in the United States. The film was originally released in the US as The Magnificent Seven, but after the 1960 remake, Seven Samurai was reverted back to its original title. Seven Samurai has stood the test of time and has become the most influential film in cinema history. Without Kurosawa's masterpiece, such films as Star Wars, A Bug's Life, and even anime like Samurai 7 would not exist. So, yeah, Brad, I was really the guy who bought the international rights, he brought it over to the U.S. and he gave it that title, The Magnificent Seven. But then in 1960, when the Magnificent Seven
The
actually
Western
came
came
out,
out.
they're like, yeah, we need to get this title out because it's obviously we got a movie in the same name. So they went back and they renamed it Seven Samurai. Also, I believe it was Hashimoto. You know, he would end up working with another screenwriter to write a script for Kobayashi, which would end up becoming what's called Akira. So eventually, this idea of the samurai committing harakiri would end up being made because it would end up becoming the film by Kobayashi.
Yep.
So, it's just it is a crazy, uh, you know, a process that went to make this movie, and also just after this movie came out, like it wasn't like this massive hit when it first came out, but it really became well known and became probably the most famous Japanese movie of all time there. And they were really surprised that just how big it was in Japan, it was big in the Western side of the world too. So it's just Brad. This we've talked about this movie so many times, Brad, off air. We talked
Yep.
about it when we did our review of Seven Samurai. Everybody owes their career to Kurosawa in this movie. Star Wars, Bugs Life, Samurai 7, um,
Sergio Leone.
Sergio Leone. Literally, there is an episode of The Mandalorian that is literally Seven Samurai.
Yes.
Yes. It is not hyperbole for me to say that this is the most influential movie of all time. This literally created the
So many
framework,
genres.
showing
So many.
genres, yeah. Creates the what's it called? Creates a remake that is probably the biggest western in the United States. But
I I think it's safe to say we said it back in the day. This is a foundational movie. It might be the biggest foundational movie. I mean, and what's sad to me is probably not enough people know that. But when they go to watch Star Wars or a
yeah,
Western movie, they should be thanking Kurosawa for kind of how that's framed up and how the storylines go.
yeah,
But something that I learned through this is I did not know that John Ford, um, Kurosawa got a lot some of those ideas from John Ford,
yeah,
which it's a full circle. It's like Kurosawa liked westerns,
yeah,
so he took some of those shots, put them in his movies, and then westerns started to follow basically Kurosawa's kind of storylines.
yeah. And I mean, and that's also why they kind of didn't like him in the in Japan. Just how much he like. We've said it before. Like Kurosawa was seen as a Western filmmaker, a Western Japanese filmmaker. He made movies through the look of a Western point of view, and
Well,
for better or for worse, people didn't like that in Japan.
well, and people in Japan were used to when you the previous before Kurosawa, samurai movies were basically hack and slash, not a lot of story behind it, and Kurosawa added that aspect to it, and just and it wasn't that those films were bad. It's just there wasn't a lot of substance.
Yeah,
And Kurosawa put so much effort into crafting these characters and giving these characters backstories. And while they're on the screen, you actually come to care not only about the Seven Samurai, you care about the farmers, you care about the farmer's daughter, you care about like anyone like that's on the screen who is supposed to be, I guess, part of the good guys.
yeah. Um. So of course, Kurosawa used three cameras for the shoot, which he had not done before. He had never used three cameras before. This was also the first samurai film from Akira Kurosawa. It's his first epic as well. Well, no, it's not. The Idiot is his first epic. Now, the version we have of the Idiot is not the epic that he wanted to release,
Yeah.
right? Um,
This
but
is his first samurai epic though.
yes, his
We
first
could we
samurai
could
epic.
say that.
Yeah, so this is his first samurai film. This is also the film that's coming after Ikiru. So
Yeah, so it has to be.
two very different films, back to back. But I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, very
Um,
very important film because Ikuru, from my memory, was a hit, and
yeah,
so he had to follow that up with
yeah.
something pretty grand. Um, I forgot what I was going to go on about, but previous before you mentioned Ikuru, what were you talking about?
There's like the what's it called? This is like his first samurai
Samurai,
epic.
yeah,
Yeah,
samurai.
samurai epic.
And I wanted to bring up. People will probably say, "Well, Rashomon had samurai and those weren't samurai movies. Like you
Yeah,
had samurai in those movies as a character, but those weren't full on the samurai
samurai
movie.
adjacent. I'd say
Samurai
samurai
adjacent.
adjacent. Yeah,
That samurai weren't the main part of those.
yeah. But like that movie doesn't really go into the code of samurai and like the morals and the values of
No, it
samurai.
doesn't have the Bushido
Yeah,
code, the humanism
yeah,
aspect of it
not
that
the way that this one
this film
does.
does.
Yeah, but Brad, I want to know, and I want you to tell the people, why did you select Seven Samurai, Brad?
It is one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. I personally love Ikiru more, but that's a personal thing. So I can't really say Ikiru is a better movie than this, but it hits more personally to me. But this film is the standard that all films should follow. It is foundational. It is amazing from dialogue, from cinematography, music, storyline. It is the perfect movie.
Yeah, um, Brad. Well, I know that, and I know that our conversations when it came to this film, we were always like, "Well, I feel like it could be edited down and all that." And it's like, I finally, this is the first time I rewatched Seven Samurai since we reviewed it that first time for the Nerdcore, which was, I want to say, about like 7.5 years ago or something like
Uh,
that.
Something like
It
that,
was
yeah.
during phase one of the podcast, so it was a while ago, a really long while ago. So that was a very different person watching films. And I was like, oh, the pacing's kind of like really draggy. Now I sat down to rewatch this film, and the pace is really good to the point where I'm like, Brad, I have no idea in my head what I would cut from this movie. I don't think anything can be cut from here.
After rewatch, this has to be my probably third or fourth rewatch. After rewatching it this last time, I personally don't know what you can cut either.
Yeah,
I've changed my mind on it, and maybe that's just from learning more about film and watching
yeah,
other films and how they're paced. And this one, the storyline, you need everything in the storyline
yeah,
in order to care about these characters and in order to get the full, you know, concept of what's happening in this movie. You need that 3 hours and 27 minutes.
yeah. And I don't know, man. It's just, yeah, like, and I don't know what the hell I was smoking back then, because like I remember when I first gave this movie, when I first watched this movie, I was like, I'm like, I'm like on a 7 or an 8, and I'm like, this is perfect, Brad. This is perfect. Like, this is as perfect as it can get. And I reiterate it again. This is the most influential film of all time, and it just stands it. And it's in 1954 to 2024. It is still great now as it probably was back then, and it just never gets, what's it called, I don't feel that drag, and like I felt so entertained, but I felt so interested in what was going on in this movie.
Yeah, and I think also you not only that, but the cast in this you have Shimuro and Mifune at the top of the list. And to me, Shimura does a great job. But Mifune, goddamn, Mifune steals the show. I think this might be his best role. Um, and I love Mifune and everything.
Yeah,
And it's just terrific. And somehow Kurosawa is able to get everything out of this cast.
yeah,
And that's a big cast. It's not like, Shimura Mifune. I actually have a list here. You have Daisuke Kato, you have Minoru Chiaki, you have Saiji Miyaguchi, Yoshio Inaba, I can't read my handwriting, Isao Kimura, Yoshio Tsuchiya, and Keiko Tsushima, who kind of make up the main cast there, last two being farmers. That's a lot of people to work with and try to get the best out of them
yeah,
for this.
yeah,
And they're all each playing very different characters.
yeah. But man, Brad, this movie is just incredible, and I can't. I think it was necessary for me to have that long break in between to not have seen this film, because I think that it really grew, and I had seen so many movies before this, like we since then that we reviewed this movie for the first time, and I know that I've seen so many Kurosawa back then now, and I've seen a lot of his. I think I've seen every single samurai epic from Kurosawa now.
I
I've seen all
think
of them.
I think we might have. I
Yeah.
don't think we have many left.
No, I think what we have left are pretty much the early work, and that's it. And
And
of course,
his
the
and his
last two.
final. His final movies, yeah,
his final ones.
which
But like,
are not samurai movies.
yeah. So I've seen all of his samurai films, and to me, this one truly is like the cream of the crop. I think this is really the one. I can't say it's his. I haven't rewatched Throne of Blood in a long time either.
Rumble is so good.
But Throne of Blood is so good.
It
But this
is.
one is just this is so influential. It's foundational. It's perfect. I can't sit through this and really agree with Pastor Raul and say that like this movie isn't what's it called balanced, because it really is.
I mean,
It has it all.
I can't agree with Pat Brad and be like, yeah, we need to cut 20 minutes somewhere.
No,
Like I rewind and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking?
yeah,
Like you need all of this in order to get the full breadth of what these characters are going through, and then what what they're trying to portray, the Bushido lifestyle, the humanistic way of these samurai helping these farmers contend with bandits. And I think Mifuni's character, Kikuchi,
yeah,
Kikuchio, or um, I think when he turns to the samurai who are basically bad mouthing the farmers, and in that one pivotal scene, just the close up of his face and the anger and the tears just welling down, and Mifune's just going, yes, farmers, they are pillagers and they're thieves and they're deceivers, but you made them that way. And just hits so hard that just that one scene alone.
yeah,
And um that that one character, it was very smart to have that one character who transcends both the samurai class
yeah,
and the farmers. And yeah, and it makes you think that the bandits that they're having to contend with, and I don't know if I've ever thought about this before, those bandits are ex-samurai.
yeah. Because they have their freaking what's it called? Their they have their uniform on.
Yeah, their uniforms, they're ex-samurai. So everything Mifune's character says in that one scene is true.
It's true. It's true. But man, Brad, this movie's incredible. Thank you for choosing it, because it gave me the chance to rewatch this movie, and I also was very salty watching this movie because Toho still has this 4K with his new 4K, which, by the way, is a new 4K restoration of this film. They are holding a newly restored version of this movie hostage over there. Will not release it over here. So, I watched
What year are we on?
We're in
With,
2024, Brad. That
yeah.
restoration was done in 2019, Brad. So it's about
Are they waiting for like the 100-year anniversary? Is that what they're going to do to me?
the 100-year anniversary of Yep.
I'm about
Yep.
to wait till 2054 for this.
Yeah, probably. But I'm glad I finally got to rewatch this movie, because I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think it's just. I think everybody owes their career to Kurosawa. In one way or another, I think everybody owes their career to Kurosawa. Everybody has owed their ways of storytelling to him. And, we wouldn't be this. I mean, fuck it, man. We wouldn't be discussing Shogun on a weekly basis if it wasn't for Kurosawa.
No, I mean, and you wouldn't have a lot of the dramas that you've had. You wouldn't have a lot of the comedies in the
Yeah.
way they are. I mean, and then what I'm glad to see is that kind of towards the end of Kurosawa's career, the people he influenced turned around and they helped fund some of his movies, like Kagemusha, like Spielberg and Scorsese and Lucas coming in and
Yeah.
helping him fund, because without them and
Coppola.
with Coppola, like we would not have such that's a movie that is just amazing too.
Yeah.
And so his influence reaches above and beyond even his death.
Yeah. So, Brad, if you're ready, then I'm ready.
I'm ready.
This is our conversation on Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Seven Samurai opens with bandits approaching a village, and we hear the screech of a woman. These bandits go into the village, they raid it, and they hurt the people, and the villagers are kind of left, specifically farmers, are kind of left like, well, what are we going to do? We have no methods of protecting ourselves. We have no methods of defending ourselves. And one of them comes up with the idea of like, why don't we hire some samurai? Well, here's where the thing where that's kind of a problem. These farmers don't have much money to hire actual samurai. So one of them says, well, what if we pay them with food? Well, they don't have a lot of food because of their farms. So, they end up finding a way, and they look for some samurai. And they find two, who then recruit some samurai. And the film focuses on the relationship between the villagers slash the farmers and the samurai, as the samurai have a working relationship with the farmers to go ahead and protect them from these bandits. And throughout the movie, we learn about the samurai at the same time as we learn about the villagers. And especially their look at the samurai and the way they view the samurai, but also the way that the samurai view the farmers. And, Brad, I think we have to start it off with discussing the samurai because, of course, that is the central figure of this film. The central figure, of course, the farmer is a very central figure as well. But in this movie, samurai is probably the most important part. And especially, we have to talk about, the code, the Bushido code. We have to talk about the values of the samurai. But I wanted to bring up something that actually the supplements brought up. Samurai only made up 5% of the population in Japan. So already Kurosawa is concentrating on not this massive part of Japan's history, even though we kind of really do look at samurai as like a really central part of the history of Japan. They really weren't that big of a part in the population. They only made up 5% of that population.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot to do with the stories and the lore that
Yeah,
has come out, along with the anime,
yeah,
in the most recent years. Because hey, what's a great way to tell stories?
yeah,
Anime.
yeah. So we look at these samurai. Every one of them are different. Of course, some of them are more calm and collected, and then of course we have you know Mifune's character who literally shows up drunk in the first time he's there, and he
And
was
and we learned he is not born samurai.
not born samurai. Yeah, and they're all not really samurai because they don't have a daimyo.
They're more Ronin
They're
than
more
anything.
Ronin. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, and
and um, I mean, going through reading, and this is something I didn't know, but a lot of those period films in Japan, they put in the Tokugawa era,
mhm,
which was, under one emperor. And instead, for whatever reason, I mean, brilliant reason, probably, Akira Kurosawa liked to do the Sengoku period,
mhm,
which is the Warring States period, which is when everything is basically at civil war.
yeah. And I think he also really does put the samurai into a really interesting position here because this is just a little bit of years removed from from the time that guns kind of get introduced to Japan. So like we're reaching this period where the swordsman is not the warrior of that time anymore. Like
Or
it's
they're slowly fading away.
you're slowly fading away. So when you're really like dissecting and really around these characters in this film, you kind of feel this underlying anxiety of like, are we even needed anymore? Like, look at us. We used to be like part of like the emperor, and now we're just being used as defense for farmers. We're
Yeah,
not that important anymore as we
I
used to
mean,
be.
like you said, they were 5% of the population. They were royalty. That's royalty. That is highborn. That's nobles. And now they're reduced to working for farmers for rice.
Yeah,
And what an interesting concept, because if he would have made a movie about nobles just walking around being samurai, it probably would have been kind of boring.
yeah. And the way that Kurosawa kind of brings that, and the way that he like focuses on the different way that each of those samurais represent different parts of the Bushido code, because all of them really hold their values like strong to their heart, but some of them kind of what's it called, question those values as well. And I think that's mostly Toshiro Mifune's character, who is the one who kind of like signals this very like massive difference between these samurai.
Yeah, he's kind of what bridges the gap between the samurai, the highborn, and then your kind of commoner, your farmer, basically in this instance. And that's why he kind of ends up being the most interesting character, is because he is that bridge and he's living on both sides and he has to kind of deal with that.
Yeah.
Whereas the other samurai, I mean, the you look at the other samurai and they stand straight. They try to keep their clothes very clean and tidy, even if they are kind of starting to turn into rags. They're very um, noble. I mean, that's really the word to put to them. And Mifune's character is sometimes on screen he looks like a mad dog.
Hmm. Somebody was telling me off air, like when I was at work, he was like, Mifune's really goofy in this film, and I would kind of agree. I would say he's goofy, but like I think he's kind of this guy who is really tired of the way that samurai view themselves, and in a way kind of separate themselves from the working class people.
They're too
So
serious. Yeah,
yeah, like you're too serious. You look down on these villagers, and if anything, we are the reason that these villagers are not that trusting of us. Like literally, one of the villagers tells the girl, their daughter, like, you need to cut your hair,
and dressed like a man.
dress like a man, because I don't know what these samurais will do to you. So
Yeah.
that kind of already establishes a relationship of like, we don't really trust these people, but we need them to defend us. And it was even brought, like, even before that, one of them was like, okay, you want to hire samurai? We don't have money. We don't have much food to offer them. What are you going to do? Offer your daughter to them? And it's like kind of already placing this idea of like the samurai being this kind of barbaric people.
I don't know about barbaric, but being like they can take what
Yeah,
they want.
yeah. And but I love the way that Kurosawa approaches that, because like he of course him the most important thing were the values of the samurai, and especially because it was the way that Japanese society would approach their lives. It was through that Bushido code, and it was through those values that they hold. Like honor was very what's it called, was very important. Death was a very sacred thing. So the idea of like harakiri was a very like sacred thing. Like it was not something that was supposed to be like embarrassing. It was something that if it came to that, you know, you were taking your life because it was the only last resort, and it
Yeah.
was it was a consequence at times because of not taking your honor seriously.
Yeah, and it was the only way of reclaiming your honor.
Yeah. So and he brings that up with the samurai, and like I said, I love the way that he really does show that with the way that the villagers and the samurai interact with each other. And the like I I'm trying to remember, there was one part in the movie, and I'm skipping way ahead, but one of them is like, you shouldn't let the lady like kill the bandit. And then once the lady comes in, he's like, one of the samurais like, no, one of the villager was actually the one that says like, no, she deserves to kill him because that bandit killed her son. Let her get revenge for what he did to her.
Let her avenge her son.
Yeah.
So somebody go help her avenge her son.
It's such a disconnect between what the samurai view with their values towards what the villagers view. And I mean, it's in the samurai has represented so many things in the career of Kurosawa. And it's interesting because we're talking about this movie, and this is the first samurai film. So seeing where the samurai evolves with Kurosawa, and especially seeing how he uses it with like Shakespearean film, like
Hmm.
Shakespearean, like what's it called, a literature. It really kind of shows how different it was, because here it's like, okay, I'm making a historical drama here. He wants to make a historical drama. There are some parts that I've seen that I saw in like reading that they said that it was very some of it wasn't like as accurate as it could be, but he wanted to like have humanity in there. So he
Yeah.
really couldn't stay too true to the history, but he stayed pretty historically accurate to that time period.
And also, this is one of Kurosawa's film, and we've seen a lot of Kurosawa films
Yeah.
that is not based on a book.
No. No.
This is they sat down and wrote it for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Most of his other movies we've watched, there's been some kind of book
Yeah.
like that's come before, and he's adapted it. But in this one, it's an original screenplay, and I think that makes it much more important because this is all Kurosawa. This
Yeah.
is Kurosawa just putting his beliefs and his heart into this, and it kind of trying to reflect on what's happening to him at that present time with him and to his people, and what he's trying to tell his people and trying to tell them there are some things in the past that you shouldn't let go of.
Yeah. And it's like 1954. This is being made in 1953. How much time we're past the end of World War II and post-war Japan, and I'm telling like that's a massive part as well. But I wanted to bring one of these things that I brought up from the book because I think it really does bring up the idea of what Mufuni is signaling in this film. So I got this from the book. It says in response to the funeral of the first samurai, Kurosawa uses the scene in two ways. First, as a further observation of the character of the crazy samurai, who, in a defiant attempt to satisfy his own feelings of frustration and impotence, raises the flag the dead man has sown, and secondly, as an effective incident for heightening the narrative tension. The bandits launched their first onslaught during the funeral. So, even though these samurai kind of like are like a symbol of protection to the villagers, they still what's it called? Even in those moments where they want to like what's it called? Be educational to themselves, they're kind of reminded like, hey, you're kind of here to serve us because look who's coming in on the other side. These bandits are now coming in to what's it called to slaughter us. So as much as these what's it called this film is trying to tell us about the values of the samurai, it's also reminding us, don't forget guys, these are warriors and they're still being used as labor for protection.
And
Um,
that's just the time period that they're showing right there
yeah,
of you know the samurai. They're ronin, they're roaming around and trying to feed themselves. You had it to a point where there's a samurai chopping wood
yeah,
for
exactly.
for some old guy. He's chopping wood for I forget if it's shelter or for rice, but he's chopping wood still.
Yeah,
um and it just shows you the struggle that this line of work, I guess, has come to.
yeah. But some of them take their work very seriously. I mean
Oh,
that
all of them.
yeah,
I
all of
think
them.
all of them,
But
except
especially
except Mifune's character, except I always sorry Kikucho,
yeah,
except Kikucho, who that's the thing though. We see that growth. We see Kikucho go from, like I said, a mad dog
mm-hmm,
to actually samurai.
yeah. His nobility, it's
Yeah,
something that really grows. And some of them like he's trying to, I can't remember his name, but it's one of the elder ones was like, he kind of like says, oh, he's he was there from the beginning, and he's like, oh, I've noticed how the samurai has changed, and I've seen so many things, and now look at me, I'm getting older, and he's a very interesting what's it called juxtaposition right there with Mifune because it's like I'm the old way of the samurai, and you're this guy who's like really
blending.
questioning who we
Yeah,
are, and
and I mean Shimura's character, Shimada,
yeah,
he is the quintessential samurai. He
yeah,
is he is the most noble. We see him in the very first scene shaving his head, cutting
yeah,
his I forget what it's called, but his hair, which big deal. That's a very big deal. In order to protect a child,
yeah,
and that's where this whole thing comes off is without Shimada, those villagers would not have gotten
No.
seven samurai. Those samurai stayed because of Shimada's character
Yeah.
and what he represented.
Yeah. And I wanted to also bring up like the test, like the way he does like the test on them. It's like, oh, he has one where the sword is like on the, so that way
Well, it's a stick.
it's a
It's
stick,
a tree limb.
tree limb, and some of them, obviously Mifune was the one who didn't pass that test, but the other ones were like some of them already knew there was somebody be there, and then one of them literally didn't even make it past the door because he was like, "You're trying to do the test on me, huh?"
Well, and that ends up being his war buddy, which
Yeah,
um also which I never noticed before. I mean, and I'm getting way ahead, but those two characters are probably the saddest characters in this movie because all of their friends end up perishing in
yeah,
battle, and these warriors are left behind
yeah,
again.
yeah, and yeah, it's and I love that, and to me, of course, my favorite character is always going to be Mifune in this film, but Shimura's character, because he is the most noble, he's also the one who's seen most of this happen already.
Yeah.
He, to me, he's like such an interesting figure, and he's kind of the one who is the anchor of the seven. He like keeps everybody grounded, even though Mifune is the one who kind of like is like, hey guys, we're kind of like in the wrong here sometimes. And yeah, but the samurai, are a massive symbol in this film, and is a massive symbol of Kurosawa's career because he built his what's it called, his career. He built most of his career and most of his biggest films around this figure, and I love that in this movie he uses it mostly as a way of saying like we should keep these values. We shouldn't. We of course should always progress, but we should, these values that we grew up on, we shouldn't forget about them because they made our country what we are.
And why it probably lasted as long as it did.
Yeah,
I think people have to remember Japan's a very old country.
yeah,
It's up there with China.
yeah,
It's a very old country that's been around a long time, and it's not like America, which is like 300 something years,
yeah,
and completely different values in that aspect. And I love how Kurosawa plays to that, and he's just like, look, yes, we've been occupied in the Western world, and there are some good things about that, but we need to keep to our past and to keep those values and our humanity and just this kind of kindness for one another and for our people, and don't lose that. Because
yeah,
if we lose that, we lose everything, we lose ourselves.
yeah. And I love that you talk about the past. And I'm gonna bring up this quote from this book, from the book that I read, because it also brings up what you're talking about, the humanity in this movie and the humanism that comes in it. Because it's like obviously we're looking at a historical drama, but Kurosawa adds so much humanity to this movie. The book said this. This book said this from one of the reviews. Kurosawa is striving for something different, a recreation, a bringing to life of the past and the people whose story he is telling. And he brings a lot of humanity to it. He makes these characters very relatable. All of them have something to go. Like whether you're talking about Shimura, who is this older man who is watching his career, which is not his career, watching this profession, die out, or you have Mifune, who kind of views his profession more as like, more as revolutionary and something that has caused a lot of people harm. So he tries to use it as a way to, to make amends with the people who have lost trust in the samurai. And then you have others who like they're war hungry and they're mostly there to what's it called just for violence.
And then you have the youthful one,
Hmm.
Katsushiro,
Yeah,
which is another interesting character, probably not quite up there with Mifune or Shimura, but another interesting character in that he, I believe, was born into a wealthy family, probably wealthy samurai family, and he hasn't seen war.
no, Yep.
And that makes it very interesting because by the end of this, he's a completely different character.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because like we talk about like and you talk about the values, right? And you talk because like what I was noticing when I was doing my research for this movie was like a lot of like the word being brought up was detached. It's like, oh, he's like Kurosawa was shooting this like a detached point of view because it's post-war Japan that he's making this in. So this is a time that the population and the society of Japan is really like um dropped the
Hmm.
code, the Bushido code. So they like the way that you're watching this is kind of like through the what's it called through the glass looking in, and you're like, okay, this is what it used to be like, and like you said, we can still hold this, but we need to kind of reflect on what this used to be, and that youthful what's it called that youthful samurai that you bring up is so important because he like you said he's born into a wealthy family. He's never seen war before, so kind of in a way he has to realize like, oh, this is what other people go through, and this is what's it called like now I understand why these villagers came to look for us because like this is actually a massive problem.
Yeah,
And because
these
that
bandits are killing all of them and stealing their food.
yeah, like the what's it called like I always find it impressive um how that one samurai gives the guy money when he's like, oh, like get ready, like one of them tells him like, hey, get the rice ready, just start cleaning it. And then he's like, oh well, the rice got stolen.
And there's so much. Actually, there's so much to such a small scene that you question up. What is his motivation for that?
Yeah,
I mean, he's highborn for sure, and he recognizes that these villagers they have no way to feed these samurai, so he gives them money. But does he give them money so that they can continue this journey?
yeah,
Because they could have ended the journey right there. There's no food. Samurai would have probably all just left. They couldn't
yeah,
entice them with anything. So part of me feels like he's very green. He doesn't know a lot of what he's running headfirst into, and that's why he gives the money is so he can continue this journey because he thinks, yeah, I want to be a samurai,
yeah,
and he doesn't know everything behind that.
yeah. And like I'm telling you, like I think that first onslaught is puts a lot of things into perspective because like some of them die there, and you really do see like some of them being like, oh shit, this is actually a problem. Like because before that, yeah, they're helping the farmers and they're there and like, but they're mostly like waiting for something to happen, and they're
Yeah.
kind of just like, and that's why I think like like as much as movies have taken from Seven Samurai, none of them have actually like really gotten the underlying feeling of like waiting for something to happen. Like all these other ones have kind of already said that the threat is there and you know it's gonna happen. But because this movie is like 3 hours and 27 minutes long, that period in between that first onslaught
Hmm.
kind of feels like forever. So when I put myself in the shoes of those samurais, they're like, was there anything even going on here? Like, what are they like? Are we even supposed to be doing anything here? So I
Yeah.
see where that frustration is starting to build in with somebody like fucking Mifune, who's like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, are we actually like supposedly working right now?
Is it like is there an actual problem here?
Yeah,
Like, because nothing has happened, and that's another great thing by Kurosawa is you'd think you'd go straight into the action with a film called Seven Samurai.
yeah,
A third of this movie is just them getting seven samurai.
yeah,
It's really, and then another third of the movie is like you said, they're in the village and they have to like coax the villagers out.
yeah. Well, remember, Brad, originally this movie was supposed to open with a battle scene.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what Kurosawa said about that. He said he had learned never to start with a major action
Mm-hmm.
scene because then the rest of the movie has to live up to that.
Yeah,
So start with something that is very common or that isn't a big giant scene, and then put that in the rest of the movie.
yeah, because we have to build towards that. we have to be able to get so. And I think that this movie is better because we get to that final fight in the rain. And I
Yeah.
think, like, yeah, like I'm glad that he didn't, start it off with that scene. And because like that whole the build to that fight is seeing how all these samurai interact with each other and seeing how some of them are dying off, and them realizing like, okay, yeah, we have to fight for them. Like they're really defenseless. We need to fight for them because nobody else is fighting for them.
Yeah. And just them taking the time to actually train what is basically a useless force.
Yeah,
They really are in the beginning when we first see them. They can't fight.
yeah,
That's not what they were born into. And
yeah,
the samurai actually have to take time. And I kind of liked seeing that. I liked seeing them going to each of these sets of units of just farmers, and you get to see like Mifune like telling them, hey, hold this straight, and like, where'd you get that? And I like that. I like that scene because Mifune was looking at that spear and like, I know you're holding it out on me.
yeah.
Where's the rest?
Yep. Um, I, and I found the quote I actually wanted to read to you about the humanity. Kurosawa actually said this, Brad. He said an action film can only be an action film, but what wonderful things if it can at the same time claim to depict humanity. This has always been my dream since the time I was an assistant. For the last 10 years, I have been wanting to reconsider historical drama from this new point of view. And it's true.
I, I mean, yes, yes, that is what, and this is an action film that has a storyline into it and humanity sewed into the fabric.
yeah,
Because if you remember before this, as I said, a lot of the films they're just straight action.
yeah,
They're cut them up, cut them down, samurai, fights. Sword of Doom. I'll throw that one out there. I
yeah,
believe we reviewed that back in the day. That is one of those. There's not much story to it. It's just really cool fighting. And then for Kurosawa to come in and just make you care, like I said, about all of these characters. And there's a lot. You care about these farmers. You care about each and every one of these samurai with different personalities. And for him to go and do that and put that along one of those old school samurai films and put that all together, it's a master class. It's amazing that he even was able to make this.
yeah,
And also, it was a movie that was supposed to only be 3 months.
yeah. Shit, took it longer than that.
It took a
Um,
year. It,
yeah.
it went a year, and one of the actors who hired on, he was actually very happy because I don't think he said he never done a film in summer, and that's why he thought he was just going to be doing a film and then it went all the way into winter.
Yep. So I also want to talk about the group and individual dynamics. Specifically, I think this is where we can actually go into the farmers here. So you know, all of them, the farmers kind of learn to work as a community because of the samurai. Because in the beginning, like all of them are kind of like, well, I don't want to be responsible for what the samurai are gonna do here if you bring them in, and be like, well, like I like they're kind of saying like, you're kind of like only looking out for your own interests here, and they're not like we're
Well,
not
and
really thinking about all of us here.
that's shown multiple times through this, how the farmer, like they're just caring about their own interests until they realize if they don't come together, they're all going to die. And if they
Yeah,
don't, like the scene where they go around and they have to decide which houses they can protect. And you have these houses outside this bridge, along with the mill, that it's one of those that there's no way to protect those. There's no way to stop the bandits from that far out. It's just they don't have enough people. And so they've made the decision to let these, I believe, 8 houses, along with the mill, just be taken by the bandits. And they can take the bridge out and they can protect the majority of the houses. And you have the scene where you have these 7 or 8 farmers decide, well, what are we fighting for? Like, what are we fighting for if we're not even protecting our own house? And they go to throw down their spears. And that's probably one of the most epic scenes with Shimura is Shimura, who has been cool and calm this whole time, comes
Yeah.
out and he is mad. He is the most pissed probably in the whole film, even when he's fighting the bandits. He's the most pissed at that point and tells them to get back in line because that's basically dishonor in his eyes. And he was ready to cut down each and every one of those farmers.
Yup. Yup. And whereas like the samurai tend to work mostly as a group, and yeah, and that could be, part of where it's like the problem for them. They kind of only think about each other as a group only, and it's like it really comes to like the idea of like individualism and the way that like the East versus the West. Like the West is very individualistic, whereas the East is very much about community and what's good for people in general. And yeah, the farmers are kind of like the farmers to me kind of represent post-war Japanese society who have been like
Mm-hmm.
influenced by the occupation, where they're kind of like, yes, working as a group is important, but like, yo, this is happening to me, and my son was just killed, so like something needs to happen now. While the other ones are like, well, what about our daughters? Like, what if they do stuff to our daughters? And it's like, guys, we either hire them and they
We die.
protect us, or we die. Like there is no other way around it.
There's no in between in that.
Yeah,
It's just funny how it takes that conversation for actually people to be like, oh yeah,
yeah.
oh yeah, I guess my little issue that I'm thinking about is
Is
not that big
that
of an issue
important?
compared.
It's really not that important in the grand
No,
scheme of things because it's like it's literally the difference between life and death. Like you either let them come in and you give up at least a bit of food, enough for them to be like fed, or you fucking what's it called allow yourself to keep getting raided and be killed by these bandits.
and speaking of food, I had a quote in here. Let me see.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
here I had a quote because the food, the millet and the rice are actually very important aspect. Again, I've never noticed before in a previous watch, probably because I wasn't even trying to think of it. But the rice becomes a very important part of this. It's
Yeah,
not only the monetary device, but it's showing also the samurai and the farmers coming together in that
yeah,
aspect. Because the samurai do end up giving their rice back to the farmers, at
yeah,
least to the children of the farmers, and Katsushiro giving it to Shino.
yeah,
We see that scene. And I have a quote here from Spotlight by Bridget Zhang, um, and I will read that.
yeah,
Yet, despite this class separation, we have characters that bridge the distance between them. Interestingly, with the use of rice. In fact, Stephen Prince argues that it is rice that structures class relations and informs every event in this film. This is seen through the relationship between Shino, the daughter of Manzo, and Katsushiro, the youngest of the samurai, who falls in love and has secret meetings in the
hmm
lead up to the climactic fight. When they rendezvous at the edge of the village, Katsushiro brings her rice to eat, which she decides to give to Cumin's grandmother, who lost her entire family to the bandits instead.
yeah. And it's so I'm glad you bring that up because I love the way that Kurosawa shows how they react to them wanting to be together. And because like he even says it, that one guy says like, what's so wrong about two people falling in love with each other? But the samurai view that as like a sign of like disrespect, and it's like you're well, not disrespect, more so like he's leaving his code because he's fallen in love with this woman,
With a commoner.
with a
And
commoner.
then the farmers are against it too
Mm-hmm.
because they don't believe it can work.
Yeah,
Because there's still that distance between them in that code.
yeah. Well, and because they like you said, like it also represents a massive like difference in the class structure. You know, you have commoners, and then you have these samurai, and they're like, and one of them are like freaking highborn samurai. So like when are they gonna actually what's it called understand? You're like it's like they're not gonna they're probably thinking like, dude, you're not gonna stay here.
No,
He's
the
probably
samurai's
gonna
not going to
take
work on the farm.
no, he's probably taking you to go with him to his royal family.
Yeah, not with those soft hands. He's not going to stay to work
No,
on the
I
farm.
ain't working the farm. He's not gonna hoe. Come
No.
on, no, of course not. And but I love what you bring up about the rice. It is remember in the movie that one dude says like they what was it the Usain bread, the Milia or what
The
was it,
millet. Millet.
millet. Yeah, they mill it and they give us rice. Like, and it's like there's a massive difference between us.
Yeah, like millet is basically animal food, from my understanding.
Yeah,
It's what the animals eat.
yeah, yeah. And but yeah, and that dynamic really becomes a really massive part, and especially, and I wanted to bring this up too, Brad, when they first arrive to find out what they need to do, they one of the farmers tells the samurai, we need to go talk to our elder, and I believe one of the samurai was kind of like, what, like why do we need to do that? Like,
I guess we need to go talk to the elder.
yeah,
I think he said it kind of like that.
yeah,
Well, I guess we need to go talk to the
yeah.
elder.
It's and somehow like this idea of like, okay, maybe they do have like what's it called? This
Have a system like
they have a system. They do kind of adhere to some sort of code.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not entirely the Bushido code, but they still have a system at work.
They have a respect for their elders,
Yeah,
which in the samurai case would be a respect for their daimyo.
yeah, yeah, and I love that when they were talking to him, they bring up circumstance, and I'm gonna read a couple things here about circumstance that I got from the book. Seven Samurai is a film about circumstance, or about man and his relationship at his best to circumstance. It is not a film about fate. In the act of circumstance, man acts wisely in the face of stupidity and unpredictability of circumstance. Fate is something man has invented to explain away his own obsessions and inadequacies. Um, what do I think that's trying to say? Is more so like the circumstance of them being there is far more important than like where this whole profession of samurai has taken them. Like if their fate is to have been born into this royal position, you know, and they're supposed to end up dying by this code. Instead, they had to have been led to this idea of like, well, now we have to work within the confines of where we are now in our society. We're not needed anymore for this, but we still have this idea of being able to what's it called help these farmers. And I think that like I really like that part of the book that I wanted to bring up because one of them brings it up and it's like well what are we supposed to do about all this, and it's like it feels very like circumstantial, and it feels like a very like it feels like we're just kind of sitting ducks here, we're kind of waiting for things to happen. And he's like, and I think the elder tells him like it's about more so like it's not about waiting, but it's about in the end it's about them like creating this trust with them to make sure that the villagers know that they can count on the samurai.
Yeah, which I mean, we see the very first scene of when the samurai come into the village, and
They're scared, bro.
going from that where there's no villager to be found. There's like the
Yeah.
one guy.
Yeah.
and to go from that to the ending where they're all working together, they're all
Mhm.
working as a group, they're working with the samurai. That is basically what I think Kurosawa is trying to say is we all have to be a community
Mhm.
and lift each other up. Otherwise, we're going to lose.
Yeah. There is no singular hero in this movie. It's very different from like the Western view of the world of like the hero's journey. There's not one single person who's doing it all. It's everybody working together, and that's why that first onslaught with the samurai kind of goes the way it does, is because everybody else is running with like a chicken without their head. Meanwhile, the
Yeah.
samurai trying to do something, but they're like, guys, this is only gonna work if we work together. Like,
Yeah, you can't be running away. Stand your post and let's throw them back
Yeah.
and
but
succeed.
they're afraid, and
Yeah.
and I understand them. They're afraid, Brad. Like they even said it like fear is a massive part of this movie. They're all afraid. It's
And
literally the reason
overcoming
why.
that fear.
Yeah, it's literally the reason why they want to hire them, because they're afraid that they're all gonna die, and they're afraid that their village is gonna be disappear because these bandits are gonna come back.
Yep.
So throughout the movie, it's different types of fear. Like they're afraid of what the samurais are gonna do to them. They're afraid of the bandits coming back. They're afraid of losing their family, or losing their daughters to them by because one of them falling in love with them, and it's just fear makes it a big part of this movie, and I wanted to bring that up because it's such an important part, and he even says it there, like stop, to me it reads as if like they're saying like stop judging them, like the samurai telling each other like stop judging them, they're afraid, like they are literally came to us because they're afraid to die, you know,
And Mifune having to bring, or Mifune's character, sorry, having to bring up that why they're afraid?
because of us.
Because samurai made them afraid.
Samurai made them afraid.
And just who's attacking them? Samurai.
Samurai. They're literally
The
samurai.
bandits are samurai.
And that was, it's been so long since I watched the film, Brad, for the first time. To me, I forgot that they were actual samurai. I was like,
Yeah,
I forgot what they looked like. I thought they
well,
were.
and that's the thing is like you hear bandits. I mean, this is my third, fourth time watching, and it's kind of clicked. I'm sure I'd thought about it a little bit before, but I was actually thinking about it during this watch because we're doing this, and it
Yeah.
actually clicked. It's like when Mifune goes, "Samurai made them this way," and I'm like, "Of course, the bandits are samurai. That makes complete perfect sense."
Yeah. It's kind of in a way, and like we say, like very indicative of post-war Japanese society. And like, it's like we're afraid to progress here. The occupation is gone. What's it called? Our old government is gone. We're afraid to move on. But like we shouldn't be afraid. If we work together and we adhere to these values that made us who we are, we can move forward. We don't have to be afraid. Like
Yeah, and we'll survive as a community.
yeah, yeah. Um, and that's why and I'm gonna bring this up. I'm loving my quotes here, guys. I'm sorry, but um, these two quotes really do bring that up. The hero who understands that death is in every case my own is able to regard the world in terms of ends. He moves in a straight line towards death, in contrast to those who flee in the face of mortality, who defer to some time later or someone else. One can thus assert that the Kurosawa hero asserts death in the world, and with it the possibility of action. And that, I think, is the lesson that is learned from the villagers after that first onslaught, and that's why they work with them. They're kind of like, oh, okay, it's no longer they're protecting us, we're protecting each other, and we have to work with each other. Instead of fleeing away from them, we should help them, because if we protect them, they're going to protect us. And that's why, like I said, there's not one singular hero in here.
No,
Everybody's their own hero in some way. And
everyone
it's
has their job
yeah.
to do, and
With a
to
movie
order to
with so
protect each
much
one.
death, Brett, it's a very uplifting movie actually.
Yeah, and there's a scene in there, and it kind of speaks to this. It's when uh Shimura's character basically lays into Mifune's, and he's like, "You left your post," and Mifune realizes, because by the end of this is when the bandits strike again. Mifune ends up, killing one of the bandits, stealing his gear, stealing his musket, and he brings it to Shimura. And he's like, look what I got. And Shimura's like, why aren't you at your post? And through that, we end up, because he did an individual thing, we lose a samurai.
Yeah,
And that weighs heavy on Mifune's character.
yeah,
And I mean, it's literally, he's at the grave site for at least 5 minutes in this film.
yeah,
So, and that's like forever, I think,
yeah,
at that time.
yeah. And but like, and you can tell like in that last fight just how much that changes Mifune's character. because he's like now he's like really like trying to protect them, and he's like he really values and understands the idea of like working with them, even though like yes, I may not agree with our position here, but like I still have a I still have a what's it called a duty to you all. I have a duty to us as as the protectors of these people, and I think that's really what switches in his brain, and that's why he what's it called he ends up giving his life for them.
I mean, when he goes and he stabs those five swords into the ground, and the question comes up, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I can't kill, all these bandits with one sword." And it's like this man is prepared to lay down his life. That's what
Yeah,
that scene is.
yeah,
He is prepared to kill every bandit he can and just perish.
yeah. And also, oh my god, man, I forgot that that Mifune had his ass hanging out this whole freaking
And it's funny because they go into, Mifune was the least stressed out of all of them. How he made it through that
yeah,
filming process is beyond anyone's knowledge.
yeah, yeah. But it's just like I forget that his ass is practically hanging out the whole movie. Like, like that guy is it's just what butt crack out the whole freaking like at least the whole like third act of this movie.
Third
His
act,
butt
the whole
crack
third
is
act,
out.
yeah. After he steals that bandit's clothes, who apparently wasn't wearing much either. Like
Yeah,
there were no pants.
yeah. But and it, but yeah, and fully prepared to give his life, and he does give his life. He
Yeah,
does, and
he's the last. He's the last one to die
he's the
of the
last one to
samurai.
die. Yeah, and and that's why, like I said, Brett, like this movie to me is very uplifting, even though there's a lot of violence and a lot of death in this movie. But that's why, like that last scene to me isn't like a sad ending. I think it's them realizing like we 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 did our job here. We didn't just like protect them. We established a relationship with these farmers, but it was sadly through the what's it called the loss of these five what's it called men,
Samurai,
five samurai.
and I mean, Shimura's character literally says, "We may have won this, but we, as a collective of the samurai, is kind of surviving another losing war battle."
Yeah,
And it's not that it's not a happy ending for the farmers who win this. The farmers are that group of people who's going to survive and continue on, and the
yeah,
samurai is just a vanishing class.
yeah,
And I think that's where Shimura comes with that. But yes, I think working as collective and showing the farmers that
yeah,
you know they can depend on them in some way, because the farmers still push back at the end, as they don't want that, like, re- not a relationship, but not like a sexual relationship. Not They don't want samurai to be within
yeah,
their families.
yeah,
They're still not there.
yeah. It's like we're still not really comfortable with the idea of allowing you back into our lives like that,
Yeah.
and it's but yeah, and but they look on to that to those five swords, and they're kind of like, well, like that's it's a realization that like our role in society is dying off, and a massive part of that is what's it called the introduction of the gun. The gun really does signal the samurai becoming obsolete because like
I did love those photos of World War II,
yeah,
where you have these pilots and they're holding these samurai swords, because they're still in the way of Bushido even during World War II.
yeah, yeah. But I want to get into the final topic here, Brad, because Kurosawa's movies always have strong female characters. A lot of them do, but um, at face value, when I first watched this movie, to me, a lot, what's it called? Some of the women weren't really like a massive part of this film. Now, having watched this film again and actually doing the research and finding out that like, oh, there's a different look into this movie with when it comes to the women. So I'm gonna read some of this stuff. I'm gonna read this stuff, and then let's go ahead and get into this topic. But I
Okay.
think it's a very interesting look into this movie here. So So this is from D.P. Martinez's Seven Samurai and Six Women. It's an essay inside of this what's it called, a book. Uh, so she says that there's actually six very important women in this movie. Typically, what's it called? Most people view this movie only having one important woman, which is of
Sheena.
course Shinu. The first one is the wailing woman whose cry at the beginning of the film propels the village men into action. The second one is Gosaku's daughter-in-law, first seen with her baby in the scene with the village elder, and last seen at the end when dying and handing the baby to Kikuchio. Kikuchio. The third is the town woman whose child has been kidnapped, an event which ultimately allows the village men, who have by now almost given up hope finding suitable samurai, to discover Kanbei. The fourth woman is the toothless grandmother, who, against the wishes of the samurai, kills the captured bandit, indicating the extent to which violence breeds violence. The fifth one is a young Shino, who, against her father's wishes, becomes involved with Katsushiro, but later rejects him, illustrating the class division between the farmers and the samurai. And finally, the sixth one is Rikichi's enigmatic missing wife, who, as Martinez points out, was not taken by the bandits, but actually given to them as a bargaining tool, a detail missed by many Western viewers due to an imprecise translation in many prints of the film. And then this is what she had to say in her essay. If there is a single message to this complex film, writes Martinez, it is this: that only for one's land, for one's family, should men be moved to take up arms. All else is more corruption, and when men's moral judgment fails, they would do well to listen to their women. Many of Kurosawa's films seem to make a similar point. In war, the only heroes are the mothers, daughters, and lovers who must endure the worst that men can do. And that, to me, does bring up, like, it really changed my outlook in how I viewed the women of Seven Samurai. Because at first, I thought it was only Shinu who
Yeah.
was important. But you look at that and you're like, yeah, the what's called the cry from the woman in the beginning literally does start this movie. It does get them to want to what's called find the what's called samurai to protect them. Um, the what's it called the toothless grandmother who wants to avenge her son does provide a new outlook to these samurai, and it does in a way just kind of talk about violence breeding violence. Uh, the missing wife is another massive part. Like all of these are things that are kind of like uh, influence the farmers to want to find these samurai. And
Yeah.
without these women,
The story doesn't move.
it doesn't move. It doesn't move at all.
Yeah, and I never really thought about it
Yeah. Well,
because it's. I mean, it's there, but at the same time, there's so much else going on in this movie. If you blink, you'd probably miss that.
yeah. Well, and it's like we're so used to Kurosawa's women being like more present,
More present and very strong.
very
And
strong.
we've said it before. Kurosawa makes very strong female characters, which at the time, very different.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not the same thing as, I'm like One Wonderful Sunday, um, shit, man, the Throne of Blood.
Yeah.
Lady Macbeth is literally the reason why that movie moves, and in Ran as well is a massive part is
Rashomon,
Rashomon. So like, you're not. It's not the same as those movies.
because those are very upfront and present.
Yeah,
These are these are more background, but like you just said, they make this. They're the reason the story progresses.
yeah, and I love that last part of the quote when she says like it's the mothers, the daughters, and the lovers who have to endure like what is happening here, because it's like they said, like we made them, we like the samurai made the farmers distrust them, and ultimately, who are the ones who are being what's it called? Who are the ones that are being like, what's it called? Warned first. daughters. Goes tell him like, well, are you gonna offer them a daughter? Well, are you you have to cut your hair because we don't want them to hurt you. Like before they even think about anything else,
It's about hiding their women.
behind their women, and it's like so as and then once again it goes as well as them like wanting to like not marry her. It's just not gonna work. They're
Well,
from a different class structure.
and you bring up that lost in translation Rikachi's
Yeah.
wife, which I didn't realize until you just read that. I did not realize she was a bartering tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was a bartering, tool. She wasn't, and it makes sense now why she ran back into the building, because
Yeah.
Rikachi let her be given to the bandits.
Yeah, and that's why
And
like that when the mill is burning apart, and that woman is outside and she hears the cry of her the child. That's why that scene is so fucking powerful. When she just runs back in there, and the samurai go in there and they're like what the fuck is going on? Like why are you going back in there? And which by the way, when we were doing the research with the supplements, finding out that like the garment that she wore instantly disintegrated.
yeah, it was
She
so
was-
hot in there, and the hot air, and one of the main characters literally went in there and like burned his esophagus.
yeah, yeah. But it's like their first instinct is to protect their women and to what's it called to make sure that they're not harmed. And the women provide a massive part of this movie. And to me I had never seen it that way before because like
Eh,
I was always used to like I had been used to like the way that Kurosawa wrote women in his other movies and they were like very upfront, but here really they are kind of like that moving factor.
well, and the main woman in this is Shino,
Yeah.
who everyone thinks of because she's very prevalent in this movie. And I'll get back to Sheena, but you brought up the woman who carries her baby out of the burning mill,
Yeah.
and it just brought to mind that you had Rikuchi, Mifune's character there, and they're just like, how did she? They check her, and she's probably been stabbed a few times or slashed, and they're like, she hands off her child to Mifune and then drops dead in the water. And they're just like, how did she even make it out? And that's just that strength that's always mentioned. She willed herself out there to save her child.
Yeah.
And just amazing in that part. And then going back to Shino's always, when you watch this originally, and if you don't think about it, Shino seems like a very weak woman character.
Yeah.
Very weird from Kurosawa. That's one thing I was always think about this movie. It's a very weird perspective from Kurosawa, who's made very strong female leads or female characters throughout all of his movies. But you think about it, and Shino is actually a very strong character because she disobeys her father's wishes. She takes up her own sexuality, and then she makes kind of the choice to not continue on that relationship.
Yeah. She's she's the one who's kind of like willing to like, she's willing to rebel against her system, right? She's willing to like rebel against it, but she's also willing to like before anybody else can do it, she's willing to put herself in the back and understand it for like for like the unit of the family and
Yeah.
about like the community. Like
Even if it hurts her emotionally.
yeah. And even though she like the other people don't understand it, like literally I'm going back to like the guy saying like what's so wrong about two people falling in love with each other. But she know even though it hurts her, she's like I have to do it. Like yeah, I have to. Like it's my duty to not just my family but my community to do this. And to me it's like yeah, like on face value you can see her as so weak. But she does all these things that everybody else is kind of afraid of doing. Like
Yeah.
and and to me I think that Shino is such probably one of the strongest female characters in Kurosawa's career because of that. She's the only one who kind of has the balls to be able to do that.
Yeah. To throw off like what society demands of her. But then when it comes to her community, make that really tough decision
Yeah.
to step away from that relationship she really wants.
Yeah. And of course the woman who goes into the fire to rescue her baby because literally she's willing to burn herself alive to
Yeah, she
make
she
sure her child.
willed her way
Yeah.
to saving her child. She
It-
literally had no more breath or life to give before she handed her child off.
yeah. Which, like, in a movie filled with these warriors who are supposed to be like these, like, amazing swordsmen and like these really, what's it called, like, noble heroes. The one who's like the
And
biggest hero is this woman who's literally able to give her life for her child.
yeah, in a movie filled with masculism,
Yeah.
it's this woman who is the strongest.
Yeah. Like, literally gives her life. Literally gives her life so that way her child can live. And so I felt that, like, discussing that was like really important because, like we said, man, like we said, like, women are so important to Kurosawa's films. And I
And
mean,
not only women, strong women.
strong women.
That,
I mean,
I
fuck's
don't
sakes,
know if
man.
I've seen a weak woman in a Kurosawa film.
No, for fuck's sakes, he makes a movie about the women who work in factories during World
Yeah,
War II. So, like, you know, to Kurosawa, women are a massive part of our society, and I think that and I choose to believe, but I'm sure that this was the case, that Kurosawa had a lot of respect and had a lot of admiration for women, and
and
he viewed them as like a very integral part of our society.
yes, and I think that that comes back to the difference between Western ideals and the Eastern ideals he was trying to portray. He's like, women are like the most important in our society. They
Yeah,
give birth, they keep their family together. They're the glue that holds us. Whereas the Western society, we've been terrible to our women. We're
yeah,
still terrible in many ways, and we haven't figured it out.
yeah. But like you said it, Brad. It's crazy how, like, like they are, and what's it called, the way we treat them, and then the way that they specifically, like, they berate them in this film, and the way that they look at them, but still they're the first thing that they think about. We have to protect them. We can't let them be hurt. We have to, what's it called, make sure that these samurai don't get involved with them.
Yeah,
They're always the first thing that they think about. And like I said, I think to me that really is indicative of what Kurosawa probably thought about women. And Kurosawa probably, what's it called, realized that, like, guys, when we're out there fighting wars, they are the ones who are really keeping it together here in Japan. Like,
okay.
Japanese society would not be the same if it wasn't for the strong women that we left to kind of take care of our country while we were gone.
And and American society should think the same because who was building everything? Who
Yeah.
was building the planes and the ships and that while the men were off fighting war?
Yeah.
Women.
And that's why it's like, to me, it's so silly that when people judge the Kurosawa for being a very Western, what's it called, type of filmmaker, it's like he still has a very Eastern way of looking at life. Like, in his movies show that. You know,
Yeah.
of course they're influenced, filmmaking and technically by Western filmmaking, but his narrative structure, the way that he approaches his themes are still very Eastern. And I mean, it goes to show just how great he is. And
I mean, there's a reason they call him the emperor.
yeah, he's the greatest director of all time. He is the greatest director of all time. Seven Samurai is the most influential film of all time. There's, I feel like I'm yapping at this point, but like, everybody owes their career to this movie. Like,
Yeah. It changed films from
yeah.
that point on. It
So
really did.
we didn't even talk about the score, Brad. Like, the music plays such a central part to this film too.
Yeah.
Like, in the fact that the main theme of this movie was, like,
From
apparently,
another it was written for another film.
yeah, and it was almost thrown away. But, like, I cannot imagine that because this theme is such a, like, it's
It's
probably one of
vital.
the most, what's it called, the most famous pieces of, like, Japanese, what's it called, composition, other than the Godzilla theme.
Yeah, and it was almost thrown away.
Yeah, I can't
Crazy.
I can't think about, like, that. Just it's silly. It's silly that, like, that was almost the case. Like, it was almost thrown away, and even then, it was like written for a different movie.
Yeah. And it ended up um perfect storm, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, Seven Samurai is iconic, guys. Is an incredible movie. I'm so glad that I got to rewatch it. I'm glad that I finally got to re-experience this movie, and I'm glad that I kind of reevaluated my first thoughts about this movie because I definitely do not feel the same way I felt all those years ago when I first watched this movie. because this really is a great movie. It's amazing, and you know, like even recently you can see it, like freaking Rebel Moon. Zack Snyder literally said that like Rebel Moon is what's it called? His Seven Samurai. He was like that's all Seven Samurai, and even
Except
then
he's
now
gonna
in
have 6 parts to it,
yeah yeah,
apparently.
but even then now in 2024 we're still what's it called using this movie as the backbone of what we're creating, and it's not even just films that are doing it. Video games do it.
Video games, television.
Yep.
I
So
mean, a lot of people, like Roll said, owe their career to
yeah,
Kurosawa.
and some aren't even willing to admit it, and that to the point that they get what's it called sued.
Sued
Yep.
Sergio Leone,
Yeah. Fistful of Dollars is a great film, guys,
but it's literally a
but
copy
like
and paste.
you can't lie.
It's a
Where
copy and paste.
yeah
There's literally a scene. I love bringing the scene up where he's cutting down like vases and stuff inside a house. It's literally the same fucking scene in
yeah
Kurosawa's film.
yeah. But Brad, is there anything before we get out of here that you wanted to bring up?
I think we've touched on some great points that go a lot deeper than our original review of this, which is
Yeah
of course what this podcast is about. And I'm just very proud that I got to talk about My Emperor and got to talk about Seven Samurai, one of my
yeah
favorite movies of all time, and probably one of his greatest achievements.
yeah. And
And I mean, I don't know what more we can say and what more we can go on about of just how amazing this film is and just how much it took to make it.
yeah, it's it's an achievement, and not just an achievement in like what it did for people, but like the fact that it literally took Kurosawa to like past the point of exhaustion to make this movie. Like he was willing to like to go that extra mile to be able to make this film,
Yeah.
and I mean he how much he put into it. I mean he Kurosawa's always been a perfectionist, but like to the point where he wanted to use like historically accurate, material to make the houses, and he wanted to make sure that that the costumes were aligning with the historical period as well. I mean, to him, he really wanted this movie to be a massive part of his about his career, and it showed because this is his masterpiece.
And I think there's a lot of directors, a lot of great directors who have that obsessive component to them that is necessary in order to reach
Yeah,
that greatness.
yeah. But I love this movie, man. And I'm glad that I revisited it, and I'm glad that I revisited it with having seen the supplements as well to kind of like learn more about it.
It added a lot to it,
Yeah, it
actually. It
adds a lot
added
more
a lot
context to it.
of thoughts that I wouldn't have never even began
Yeah,
to materialize.
yeah. I can't even think about how long this movie would have taken if he would have shot this on one camera. Holy crap!
And then the 3 camera aspect of it,
Yeah,
some of that, it just puts you right in the middle of the action,
yeah,
which
yeah,
freaking cool.
yeah. Like I love the what's it called, the way that he cuts all those samurai running to help. Like he's like one, and then the
The
next
fight
one.
scenes and all that
Yeah,
with in between the horse's legs, and
yeah,
you see Mifune almost get trampled like 3
yeah.
fucking times in this.
Because it's like
Just
it's getting as
mind.
much coverage because and it makes that atmosphere for the movie, and
And then the editing technique he uses with that,
yeah,
it was very unique at the time, very new,
yeah,
and Kurosawa did great with it.
yeah. I love this movie, man. Thank you so much for choosing this movie, Brad. This is it, man. This is season 2. It's over, guys. That means that it's gonna be a couple of months until season 3 happens again. But I'm really happy that we finally got to put a what's it called, an end to this chapter of this podcast. And I'm glad that we got to discuss great films. Brad literally discussed what's it called, two of my favorite films. This one, and he discussed Stalker. So I think both of those are both, not just this episode, but that episode as well is an incredible episode. It's a great episode.
Stalker's amazing. And
Yeah,
then we also discussed Jackie Brown, which
Jackie
is
Brown,
one of
which
my favorite films.
yeah, great episode too. So thank you guys so much for the support on season 2. It has been great time. It's been so much fun. It took longer than necessary to finally finish this, but honestly, guys, having to redo it and what's not redo it. I'm sorry, having to change, it coming to my channel compared to like the Nerdcore and what's it called, being able to do it here doing some in person, and it made it made this process a lot of fun. So I had a lot of fun with this season. Next season is gonna be great. It's gonna be a lot of new films that we're gonna discuss. We might have some new guests on, and I think it's gonna be a great time. So, Brad, thank you for being the season finale, Brad. You did a great job.
Thank you,
So
Rob.
hats off to you, man. You did a good job. But that's what
This is
happens.
always fun. I get to talk more about movies I like
Yeah.
and love.
It's also what happens when I tell Brad, "Hey, Brad, you got to prepare for this." So like,
Brad, this is season finale. Like
yeah,
you will come and bring it.
yeah,
So I really hope I did my best. I
yeah,
did some research. I watched three movies in the past like 3 or 4 days just on Kurosawa, which is not a problem.
yeah,
Like I'm willing to do that. So that
yeah,
is not a problem. And I hope I get brought on next season. I'm an easy guest to bring on, so usually Rahul does. But
yeah.
we'll see.
But yeah, and I was like, Brad, I know this is a foreign concept to us, but we need to do some research before this.
What? I don't just watch the movie? Okay.
Yeah, okay. But it's been a fantastic time. Brad, you can go ahead and just plug what you need to plug here and tell them where they can find you.
I'm going to plug what I always plug, and that is the Nerdcore. At the Nerdcore _ on Twitter, at the Nerdcore on YouTube, patreon.com/the Nerdcore if you want to support us in our future endeavors and helping us, get out our reviews more and more. We have the biggest back catalog, I think, in all of movie
Podcast
review
history.
podcast. So there you go with that.
Yeah,
If you're looking for content, we've got years.
yeah. Yeah, some podcasts finish at 100, some finish at 400. We're at 638, I believe.
And that's only the main show. That
Yeah,
doesn't include the live show. That doesn't include multiple other shows
yeah.
that may or may not still be here. But yeah, so
Point
you
is,
have a huge back catalog.
we're still going strong here. Yeah. But of course, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a great season. As always, you can follow me at the Nerdy Chicano on Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Serialized, TikTok, and on Twitch. I'm the same handle on all of those. My friends, Patreon is a pretty important part to this podcast. If you want to go ahead and get it early before anybody else gets to listen to it, this is going to be a quick turnaround because this episode was actually supposed to release this month, but it's going to be actually it was supposed to be released last month. So this is only going to be available for, I want to say, like 3 days compared to like the 4 months that I usually have this available for you all. But I had to push it a lot, and I had to make sure that we had as much time as we could to do research for this movie. So it's going to be a quick turnaround for the editing, but you can go ahead and get it early at patreon.com/the and you can get a lot of other cool exclusives like video essays and some exclusive reviews that I only do for my patrons. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, you click the like button, and you click the notification bell so you don't miss an episode of season 3 of the Cinema Condition on this channel. If you're listening to this on the audio feed that this podcast lives on, make sure that you leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app of choice, and you leave a follow, and you follow us on that podcast app. Of course, you can check out the Nerdcore by going to nerdcore.com, and the Nerdcore on our Twitch, YouTube, and Kick is the same handle. We would really appreciate you all to give us your viewership over there. And of course, guys, we're done here. Next season we'll have some great films, and I'm really excited to continue on with the next season. We'll see. I'm still not at the point where I want to end this podcast, so we'll see where we go with next season. So as long as I still have the feeling of wanting to continue it, and I'm still enjoying making this podcast, I think I will continue doing this podcast, even though this one does take a lot more time than like the Nerdcore does. So we'll see how it goes. I might just end up having to cut the amount of episodes, the amount of picks that people get. But with that said, guys, to all my wonderful cinephiles and renowned scholars, celebrate the love of cinema today, tomorrow, and every day after. Catch you all in season 3, guys. Bye-bye.